Welcome to another Steer Your Career podcast. Today I have Omar Halabieh on here. Yet another person I've met on LinkedIn. Omar is awesome. He is a seasoned director at Amazon. It's not easy to become a director. He got promoted multiple times there. We talk about the role of mentorship and how mentorship can accelerate your career. So Omar gives some really good advice on how he has built relationships with mentors and leveraged mentors to accelerate his career and how he's given back on the same front. So I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. And by the way, if you are ever looking to get a job at a company like Amazon or the FANGs or the Magnificent Seven or some of the top tech companies in the world, or frankly, any company, we help with careers across pharmaceutical and financial services and all over the place. If you are looking for a better job quickly, confidently, and with lots more money, go to our website, kadimacareers.com. Check out our personalized coaching program and our group coaching program. And we're happy to help get you more interviews, more offers, and more money. Before I hand you off to the conversation that Omar and I had, let me just leave you with three last words. Own your career. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Steer Your Career podcast. Today, I am super excited to have our first podcast guest, I believe, from Dubai. This might be a new venture for us here in the SICK podcast, but we have Omar Halabieh here, calling in from Dubai. He is a leader at Amazon. But without further ado, I'd love Omar to introduce himself and tell the SICK career audience here a little bit about him.
Awesome. First of all, thanks a lot for having me on the podcast, Alan. I've been looking forward to this. As you mentioned, my name is Omar Halabieh. I'm currently software development director at Amazon, specifically leading payments technology for Amazon in the Middle East and Africa region. Overall, I have over 20 years of experience, and I've been with Amazon for almost 10 years now, and the last 5 in this role and based in Dubai. Previously, I was based in Seattle. And looking forward to our conversation today.
Nice. Thank you, Omar, and thanks for spending some time with me and our audience. We met on LinkedIn, how I meet most people nowadays. Pretty much. You and I got to talking a little bit, and we've chatted a bunch on LinkedIn. We're in the similar communities, and I've always been very impressed with your career trajectory from afar. I don't know it all that well, but looking at your LinkedIn profile, I'm sure that didn't all come from the blood, sweat, and tears of yourself. I'm guessing that you might have had some help along the way from some mentors. So if my assumption is correct, what role has mentorship played in your career?
Sure. Absolutely, Alan. I always say it takes a village to build your career. And I'm super grateful for everyone who's supported me along this journey. So I can definitely say confidently that if I trace back every major decision point in my career, there's been mentors' sort of thumbprint over it, because these are decisions that you're typically facing for the first time. They're relatively high stakes in terms of consequentiality of the decision that you're making. And so you don't want to be taking these based on your best guess at the moment. And you can really benefit from the experience of people around you who've been there in those situations. So an example of this, I remember there was a particular time during my career at Amazon. I believe this was maybe 2 or 3 years in. And I was managing at the time 1-2 pizza team doing software development. And I felt that the team had reached a good state in terms of, from a people perspective, like the team has developed. We had some strong bench of talent in the team. The team was delivering on its goals, meeting its operational sort of objectives and targets. And I felt at that point on, I can be doing more and I can be creating more impact for the organization. But to be honest, I was maybe a little bit hesitant, maybe a bit afraid in terms of like, how should I approach this conversation with my manager? Do I just show up at their door and tell them I can do more things or give me more work? Or how exactly do I approach this situation? And I spoke to my mentor and asked him like, hey, here's the situation I'm facing. Here are the givens in the current situation. Like, how should I navigate or approach this conversation? And even though in some sense I had all the right pieces in terms of how I approach it, but I really needed that validation in terms of bouncing it off of someone and really getting their perspective in terms of, am I thinking about it the right way? Is this the right way to go about such a conversation? And the validation that I obtained from my mentor, of course, they suggested also a few tweaks into the approach. really helped me gain the confidence to step up and have that crucial conversation with my manager. And after I had that conversation with my manager, they acknowledged that they'll help me continue to grow my career. And about maybe 2 months after that conversation, I remember a sister team had their manager depart. And at that time, basically, my leader gave me the opportunity to take on managing that team in addition to my current responsibilities. That movement directly translates into the conversation that I had with my mentor. That's just maybe one example that I wanted to share. But again, if I trace back through my career, pretty much every single major decision point and sort of career change trajectory that I had, I can link it to some conversation or the other that I had with a mentor at some point.
And one thing to clarify, I think you were using some Amazon parlance of 1 to 2 pizza teams. So
Sure.
I think that's like how many people can consume a pizza. So it's about 3 to 4 people per pizza, approximately.
That's always a debate as to how many people, how big the pizza is, etc. But yeah,
Yeah. So this was while you were at Amazon, and you've been at Amazon, I think you said almost 10 years now.
yeah,
And I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile. You went from senior TPM to software development manager to senior software development manager, now to a director, which is really damn hard to get in at Amazon or any company, but especially Amazon. It's a very grueling, rigorous process, bar raisers, all the process and so forth. And you talked about leveraging mentors along your way, and probably not just in this example, you were saying almost every career decision. Talk about this mentor in
yeah.
particular. What level were you? What level was this mentor? And how did you originate this relationship with this mentor?
So at the time, I was basically a software development manager. So first line sort of development manager, equivalent of L6 at Amazon. And my mentor at the time was an L7 senior SDM. So they were one level basically above me, and they've been at the company for quite some time.
So they have seniority in time, seniority in level.
Exactly. And really like a deep appreciation of the culture and how things work at Amazon. Incidentally enough, like that particular mentor was actually one that interviewed me at the time. And so I kept up that relationship going post me joining. And as with any relationship, like investing in it and having these continued conversation and really closing the loop, I feel, with your mentor in terms of as you're having these conversation, as you're getting these advice, how are you applying them and how is it that the mentor is seeing you progress, I think feeds into that relationship. And I've kept it since. A lot of other mentors, I would say, in terms of how do you identify or how do you get a mentor, I feel it comes down to a few things, at least, that have worked for me in the past. I think one is obviously performing well tends to attract mentors to you in terms of as people see you perform, see your potential from maybe up close, they're likely to want to jump in and help you become even more successful because they see how seriously you take your work, your career, etc. So that was maybe one aspect. I think the other one is, I would say, more on the individual to be observant. There's a lot of people around you. Look at who inspires you, who's really good at what they do in a particular area that you're looking to grow. I think the more observant that you become, you'll notice that there are mentors all around you, but it takes intention to be on the lookout for you to start noticing them. Another way is to simply ask your manager. They may know folks or they can recommend folks. And even if those folks don't work out for whatever reason, availability, maybe chemistry, etc., they may know somebody else that they can direct you to. So starting with your manager and going there. Some companies, depending on, especially medium, large companies, have formal mentorship programs that you can lean on to identify mentors. And then obviously nowadays, I feel like we're super lucky that even outside your company, there's a lot of online platforms and even through networking on LinkedIn that you may be able to find mentors even outside of your formal organization. It does require courage to step in and ask, but if you don't ask, the default answer is always no. Go and do it.
So in the first case, it sounds like someone noticed you and saw potential in you and said, "Hey, Omar, let me help you out here career wise." That's awesome. I haven't been that lucky, but you've had more of an impressive career. Probably people have glammed on. They're like, "Hey, let's support this fast rising star." When in the latter category, where it's been for me and maybe some folks that I know, where we need to be a little bit more proactive in seeking out that mentor. You talked a little bit about identifying those people in and around you, slightly above you, relevant experience. But then how do you, and you also talk about not being fearful of asking. So how do you actually go out and after you identify this person, how do you convert them to someone that will mentor and advise you?
I think, Alan, the first thing that I would start with is being very specific and clear as to what is it that you're looking for, and how you want your potential future mentor to help you. Even if it's to admit at that point that you're not really sure, but maybe the first step is to get that clarity. But you need to be very clear in your mind, is like, what are you trying to get out of the mentorship? Because as people see that you've invested the time and effort to get that clarity and be intentional about what you're looking for, I think they're more likely to help you than if you just approach somebody and just say, hey, can you be my mentor, just in a very generic sense. I think the second point, it really helps also to maybe outline or iterate why are you choosing this specific person. If there's a reason in terms of a specific skill set or a background or area that they can help you in, because I think it shows like a high degree of ownership that you've done the research and that you're really being intentional about it as well. And then I would also say that probably start with a small ask in terms of whether it's from a time or effort commitment from your mentor. Get to know them, because this also offers you an opportunity to assess chemistry and bond between you and your mentor. So maybe it's, you don't need to go up front to them and say, hey, I need an hour every 2 weeks for the next year from you, but maybe I just need one meeting for 30 minutes in 2 weeks time, and is that doable? And as you have that first meeting, as you discuss what you need to discuss, then figure out what makes sense to do from there. But start with a smaller ask. It lowers the barrier to entry in that respect, and it really allows you to also assess whether this is something you want to move forward with or not. So those are things that I utilize. And then again, I think as you approach folks, they're not able to support you for whatever reason, always ask for who else they would recommend. I think that's a great way to also get some good recommendations. And that has happened to me, especially when people are, for example, some mentor may already be oversubscribed. So they may tell you, hey, I don't have time to take on any new mentees at this time, but maybe you can try this other person. So always ask for a recommendation.
And do you recommend reaching out via email, via Slack, via DM on LinkedIn? Is there a particular way that you
Sure.
suggest doing this?
For me, yeah, I would say a message, because somebody would need to think this through. So whether it's a LinkedIn message or an email that you send out, I think just keep it clear, crisp, and concise. I think everybody's busy, but I think people really appreciate when you've taken the time to really crystallize your thinking, that more likely than not, they'll be able to step in and help you.
So you reach out to someone, you're putting your neck on the line. What happens if they don't reply? What's the downside?
Sure. I would say in that respect, acknowledge that, hey, out of the messages that you'll send, obviously not everyone will respond. I think definitely sending up at least one follow-up to me is important. So give it a few days, try again, send a follow-up. If the person doesn't reply, then I think it's time to move on and try to find someone else. Ultimately, again, there's like with mentorship, it's not like there's a singular perfect mentor for you. There's a lot of people that can help you out there. And just because one person or two people said no doesn't mean you should give up on the rest. So continue trying until you find someone who's willing to help.
Exactly. And I find this very similar to the job search.
Absolutely.
So, whether you have a mentor like to advise you on your career decisions, or someone even just to advocate for you for an open role, you may reach out to a bunch of people that may not reply to you, but you will likely find a subset, especially if you put a little bit of care
Yeah.
and reach out in a relevant and polite and humble manner, that
Yeah.
people are willing to help. There's a lot of people that are open to providing advice and support out there.
Absolutely.
So once you start developing this relationship with a mentor, how do you maintain it? Or do you have to actively maintain it? How do you leverage this mentor over the course of time? What are some best
Yeah.
practices that you've done yourself? Or as you mentor other people, what have they done to maintain a strong relationship with you?
Awesome. I would say maybe the first thing that comes to my mind, Alan, is like respecting the mentor's time. I feel for me is like sacrosanct, because literally your mentor is giving you the most valuable thing that they have, which is their time and attention. And I'm sure they have 100 other things that they could be doing with their time. So I think what that means in practice is like coming prepared in terms of what do you want to talk about? What's the challenge or the opportunity that you want to cover? And really, if there's nothing for that particular instance, proactively reach out to say, hey, I don't have anything to discuss this time. Maybe we should cancel the instance. I just feel that really reflecting on the fact that like you respect their time, I feel comes number one. And I always think that the mentorship meeting is really the mentee's meeting. And so it's up to you to really drive the meeting in a way that helps you. And so demonstrate that ownership, show them that you've done the homework and come prepared. I think the second area that I would mention is like really being open and honest with your mentor. You should establish a safe space with your mentor. And I very much look at my mentor, I would look at like how you talk to your doctor or your lawyer. The more information that you give them about what your situation is, how things are going, etc., the more effective their guidance and help that they'll provide you with will be relevant to you in that respect. And then I would say maybe the third point would be around making sure that you take action on the discussion and what you agree on in terms of next steps, because I feel like that's what kind of feeds the loop and keeps the mentor engaged in the relationship that you have with them. So always come back. I always like to start with updating my mentor like in the first few minutes in terms of like recap of what we discussed last time. What are the things that I've done with whatever information or guidance or ways of thinking that they've shared with me, so that they get essentially more convinced about continuing to invest in you. And yeah, maybe the last thing I'll add is like it's also important to realize at what point either your objectives or whether it's the mentor's availability or for any factor, when is it that the relationship is in some sense not necessarily working out in the way that it needs to, and then figure it out whether it's time to either make an adjustment and give that honest feedback, or maybe just recognize that perhaps, for example, you've changed roles, or maybe your focus in your career has changed, or for whatever reason. Don't be afraid to step in and formally end the relationship. I think I really respect people who come to me and say, hey, we've gotten what we needed and now we're going to move on, because that also enables me to then reinvest that time into someone else that I can really help there. So formally closing the loop, I feel, is also important. It's not something necessarily we always look to in terms of ending a relationship, but I feel it's an important part of the mentorship life cycle.
Yeah. And I think you bring up lots of valid points there. The mentee needs to own this relationship.
Yeah,
They are the one who sought out the advice. If they're coming unprepared and they don't follow up on things and they don't honor the mentor's time, good luck in
yeah.
maintaining a strong relationship and earning that advocacy that will really set a mentor apart. So you need to put in your work too. Don't be expectant of like amazing mentorship unless you come prepared and guide the conversation and guide the relationship as well.
Absolutely. And the quality of the what you get out of the relationship is really proportionate to how much you put in terms of the areas that you bring in to discuss and the actions that you take out of it. So again, just because you have a mentor doesn't change anything. It's really around the discussions and the actions you take that actually end up having the impact on your career. Yeah.
Yeah. And one last thing on mentors before we switch
Yeah.
topics here. I know you mentor a lot of people. How can a mentor help you also? Like from a selfish perspective, like I know most people
Yeah.
like to mentor people because they like to give advice. People like to give advice. We're doing that all
Sure.
the time on LinkedIn and friends, family, and so forth. But how can it help you in your career?
I think for me, in a couple of ways, I very much believe it's a two-way street. So I think the first one is it really helps you hone in on your leadership skills, whether that's listening to your mentee, really demonstrating empathy, asking good questions. So all these skills, like you're exercising while mentoring someone, maybe is one thing. I think the second one is it really brings, at least for me, an immense sense of fulfillment. Maybe it's hard to describe why that is the case, but it just feels good in that respect to be giving back as well. I think the third one I would say is you definitely learn. I truly believe it's a two-way street in that exchange, whether through the feedback that you get from your mentee, the new situations that they're facing, new perspectives that they bring in. It helps widen your array of tools, let's say, in particular situations. Again, the more that you see different situations there. I feel it also helps me stay connected to the ground level in terms of what's happening, even understanding, for example, if I have a mentee in another area of the business, it helps me understand and broaden my business acumen, technology acumen, depending on what they're working on. So as part of that conversation, I'm also learning some new things as well. And it really helps you, I feel, build a network that you can tap into, right? Many people that I've mentored have gone on to other, for example, other parts of the same company or maybe other companies. These are people I feel I can lean on for anything, really, because I feel like you build this reciprocity in the relationship that really are people that you can call up, and I'm sure they'll be the first ones to pick up the phone in that respect. So those are maybe some of the things, at least, that I find in terms of positive side effects that you end up getting as a mentor in the relationship.
Great. Awesome. And I've found that as well. And you do seem like someone who likes to learn and grow. Not only do I know that from our brief conversations we've had, but for folks I can see, you have a ridiculous book collection behind you. Like, are there some particular books that you've recommended to people along the way from a career perspective? For it could be mentorship, or it could be anything career related that either you've relied on or that you most recommend to other folks. Either it's on your shelf or not, and you
Sure.
have a lot of books
Yeah,
on your
yeah.
shelf.
So I have a much larger Kindle collection, but here we're running out of space. From a career perspective, I think one of the top books that I recommend is like "What Got You Here Won't Get You There" by Marshall Goldsmith. I think the title in of it itself really says it all, and I think that as we work with folks from a career development perspective, it's really understanding the difference between performing highly at your current level versus getting promoted to the next level. And again, early on in my career, I used to think that both of these things are equivalent, meaning as I perform highly in my current level, that automatically puts me in the rank to be considered for promotion to the next level. Whereas obviously, the more I learned through my own experience and the experience of others, is while high performance in the current level, in some sense, is a prerequisite to get to the next level, it's necessary but not sufficient. So you really need to identify what are the separating traits and things that you need to do from a skill set perspective differently to demonstrate next level thinking, next level performance for you to then get recognized through a promotion. So for me, that book really stands out as like a foundational pillar to how we think about career development and progression in one's career. Maybe on mentorship, one of the books that I like a lot, it's more recent. It's Build by Tony Fadell, like the guy that used to work at, I think, at Apple.
Yeah, I think he was
Yeah, yeah,
Nest and Apple. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, he was at
So
Google for a bit while I was there.
yeah, sure. Yeah, I think with Nest and everything else, but I think his approach, like in the book, about something that strongly resonated with me. So I would also recommend that book. Whether you're a mentee or a mentor, I feel like you can learn a lot from it in terms of how to be better on both sides of the fence.
I've heard a lot of good things about that book, and I have read What Got You Here Won't Get You There. I think I've read it, or I have to reread it. But what's great about that first book, which I can talk a little bit more about, is it's very aligned with mentorship. Because what's gotten you here are things that your lived experience, your what you've seen, what you've done, and that
Yeah,
got you here. And then if you want to go forward and you want to go into the future, you haven't seen what the future looks like, and that's where it's
yeah.
critical to rely on mentors, advocates, so like friends, like other people to like see what it looks like around the bend.
Totally, totally. And I think the best, and that's why I think having these folks that are at the next level, think of them as maybe role models in that respect, or people that are actually performing the role. I learned a lot even just from observation. So I think who you're observant of and who you're able to interact with on a day-to-day basis also has a big role to play in that regards.
Yeah. So you've used mentorship a lot within your decade plus at, or decade at Amazon and throughout your career. How have you leveraged relationships at all to get in the door at Amazon or Direct Energy or any of these other past places? Have you worked with relationships to get these jobs, or have you cold applied to jobs that you've gotten in the past? And what's been like the breakdown of that?
Sure. I think at least with my first role coming out of college, I felt like at the time a lot of the information sessions that used to be held on campus, I think were something that I really appreciated attending, both to learn more about the companies, what they do, etc. But also it gives you an opportunity to build a connection and a relationship with key folks, sometimes even leaders from those companies used to come and present, not just folks, say, from recruiting or HR or whatnot. And you'd be surprised that, like, you would think that a lot of these events would be, let's say, oversubscribed, but you'll be surprised that in a lot of cases, at least during my time, a lot of these sessions didn't have so much attendance, which was great for the people that were there, because then you got to build literally one-on-one relationships with the folks. And especially, at least just to get an opportunity to interview, I felt was a great chance, because they were there, so they were going to interview as many people as they could fit in. So I felt that's maybe, especially for those that are maybe about to graduate or still in college, I felt is a great way to get your foot in the door and basically get started. Later on, especially for example, in my role at Amazon, I felt that your online presence, I feel, plays a big role. I think definitely more so now than probably ever. But for me, being reached out to by a recruiter, so being clear on what job role are you in, what do you do, having some minimal presence in terms of having your profile updated, being clear on, again, like what your background is, what you're interested in, etc., I think is the other one that helps you attract basically opportunities. And I think finding ways to build your network, like for me right now, it's mostly through content creation and engaging with others that also do the same, is a ways to do it. There are many different ways to do it. Any way you do it is fine as long as you're doing. So invest in finding a way to build your network over time, because when you do need it, you want to have something that you can lean on. So forward building it becomes important. Even if at times you're asking like, hey, why am I spending effort doing this, or why am I spending the time? You will recognize it at some later point that this was a good investment. So
Yeah, as the adage goes, dig the well before you're thirsty.
exactly.
Yeah, very cool. So I have three more questions for you
Sure.
before we wrap things up. First, you're a director at Amazon. You interview, you've hired lots of people. It's a super competitive market now. What makes a candidate stand out that makes it worthy of you giving your time or your team's time to actually consider the person for an interview? Let's not even talk about the interview, because the Amazon interview process, we've talked about that on lots of episodes. There's SOPs around that,
Sure.
the standard operating procedures.
Yeah.
But what makes a candidate stand out to you as a hiring manager where you might say to the recruiter, hey, take a look at Alan, or something like that?
Sure. At least for me, Alan, personally, what I look at is in terms of basis the opportunities that this person was presented with, really what kind of impact have they been able to demonstrate in their role and in their organization, and what's been their trajectory in doing so and creating that impact through the organization that they were in. Because I feel like that's in some sense an equalizing factor, because it's a function of the opportunities that you have at your disposal and what you were able to make out of them. And if, of course, like in different companies, you get different types of opportunities. But that's what I look for in terms of what impact has this person really brought in? Are their basis the profile that they have or their resume is like, what thinking have they brought in? What new thinking have they brought into their role to propose ideas, drive ideas forward? So I'm looking for things like in the Amazon maybe leadership principles, like high sense of ownership, a high sense of what I would call like agency, which is a combination of having ownership, but also having a high drive for taking action
Yeah,
and getting things done.
highest action.
I feel for me, those are probably like key indicators that this person has the right, let's say, aptitude and is able to translate that into outcomes, to at least have a conversation and see where we take it from there in terms of the interview process.
Awesome. Now we're down to two questions. You've given lots of great advice here about mentorship and about how to stand out with leaders. What is one final piece of sick career advice that you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Sure. I would say, Alan, the one piece of advice I lean on the most is really leveraging your curiosity. I think if you stay curious about how things operate, not just within your immediate space or what you're working on now, but the spaces that are adjacent to you and what's happening out there, I feel is such a driver of not only growth, but also of fulfillment, and it will get you places. So remaining curious, I feel, is a big part of also being adaptable and the growth mindset. So for me, I'm always reminded of that when I look at my 5-year-old, is really how do you embrace that curious mindset of asking whys, inspecting how things work. Really, I think it's something that maybe as adults at some point we lose a little bit of that. So how do you be intentional about cultivating that curiosity and really leveraging it to help you grow? Like you hear, for example, about a lot of talk, obviously, about Gen AI and the developments there. Get curious, jump in, try some of the tools that are out there, some of the models that are coming out, compare the models, read some articles. I think it's really about going beyond the surface of hearing about things to being curious and jumping into them.
Yeah, and curiosity is key. And like with 5 year olds or 50-year-olds like myself, it's
Sure,
key to maintain that curiosity. Last question I have for you, Omar. I think
sure,
I know the answer to this, but maybe not everybody who's listening to will know this. Where can people find you
sure.
online if they want to learn more about from you? Maybe reach out to you and ask for mentorship. Not that I want everybody to go reaching out to you and ask to
That's
mentor you,
okay.
but how can people
I'm
find
on
you and reach out to you?
Best way to reach out is on LinkedIn. I'm there and I post daily content on leadership development and career growth. So send me a connect request, follow me. Happy to engage and help in any way I can.
Awesome, Omar. Well, I always appreciate your posts on LinkedIn and I appreciate our conversations. One day we'll meet in person, either in Dubai or if you're ever in New York, let me know. Or sometimes
Awesome.
I'm in Seattle. So, with that, thanks so much. And I appreciate your time and all you do, Omar.
Most welcome, Alan. Thanks again for having me, and it's great to connect as always.
Bye bye.